Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm not suffering in as much humidity as you are.
Yeah, it has been brutally humid. Not too hot, but like 85 degrees with like 80% to 90% humidity every day down here in San Diego for the past like week or two. And we were just joking about, like, I sweat a lot, like exercising as it is. This might be TMI, but I have just been it's like I just jumped out of the pool after I'm done playing basketball most days. Like, I am just like, there's a thick sheen of sweat all over my body. My shirt is soaked all the way through. Like, it looks like I showered with my clothes on. Like, it's pretty ridiculous, honestly. But yeah.
Meanwhile, people up here are in jackets and hoodies.
Is it that chilly by you guys?
Well, the high was 60.
Well, it sounds like Wisconsin is kind of more like what's going on here, because it's been
even
massive heat wave out there. Yeah. Been up in the 90s, heat wave every day. It's been.
It sounds like Keyshawn Nixon would be wearing a hoodie no matter where he was.
No, that's crazy. I can't imagine like wearing a hoodie in 80-degree heat, let alone 90-degree heat, let alone 90-degree heat doing practice. But we are burying the lead a little bit because the reason we are here, as I just mentioned, is Packers practices are back. They are back. We are 2 days in now. We are recording to you here.
The 2023 season has started.
Yes, and we are recording to you here the night of Thursday, July 27th. This is after the Packers' second practice. They practiced yesterday on the 26th and then today as well. And we are just kind of here to react to the news from practices so far, how players are looking, how players are performing, who is playing where, who is starting with the ones, who's still with the twos, et cetera, who's healthy, who's not. And we're going to break that all down for you today about what's going on through 2 days so far. But before we do that, just to pitch a couple of things. If you like what you hear here today, come give us a follow on Twitter at FatherSonPacker, or I guess it's called X now. Come give us a follow on X at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out or Z'd out or whatever the terminology is now. Whenever we have new episodes,
like X out. You like say that you've actually made something, released it, or you deleted it. I X'd it out.
Yeah. Who knows?
It can mean anything.
I'm gonna start saying. I'm just keep saying tweet. We tweet out when we have new episodes, articles we find interesting, pieces of news from practice. Any video that we find from practice, keep it on the down low, though, because apparently those aren't supposed to exist. But if you're interested in the 3 videos we saw today, they got retweeted on our Twitter account. And if you like everything you see here, come follow us at FatherSonPacker, like I said. And then if you like us even more, come subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We even put all our episodes out on YouTube. Come subscribe to us there. It would really help our numbers. But yeah, so come, just... if you like what you hear, come give us some support. We'd really appreciate it. But, Dad, should we kind of jump right into this thing and start talking about the news?
Sure, let's jump into the news. One of the first things we found out this week was that the Packers had signed another wide receiver, Cody Crest from Sam Houston State. I think he just came out of college this year. He was originally, I think he's already been, it's like Packers might already be his third team. I don't know if you're actually on the Colts or not. Then he was cut by the Steelers in June. Supposedly very athletic, 4.3, 840, and 9.77 RAS. But it was weird. I was looking up his name on the RAS website, and I actually got 2 cards for him. One from 2022 with a much worse RAS, a slower 40. So I don't know if he did like a workout in the spring of 2022 and just like didn't do well. And he was 7 pounds heavier, much worse. So when his workout he had this spring in March, he was lighter, way faster, much better agility, and a really high RAS score. And to make room for him, they cut Jeff Cotton, who had been hurt.
Yes. And then speaking of players who are hurt, the next piece of news is, unfortunately, there are some injuries going into training camp. And those players are Grant DuBose, who you might remember didn't really participate in OTAs or minicamp or rookie minicamp either. It's been kind of announced that he has been dealing with a back injury during this time, so just something to keep an eye on. He still has not participated in practice. Rashawn Gary and Eric Stokes, it was kind of announced that they might, in fact, actually be back during this training camp in a few weeks. So that would be ahead of schedule for both of them based on previously announced and previously reported schedules. So that's some good news on the injury front there. Beyond that, the next injuries are specifically these last two practice related. And that is that Caleb Jones, Tarvarius Moore, and Tariq Carpenter did miss the first day of practice on Wednesday with illness, but did practice day 2. And then Dontavian Wicks missed the second day of practice after sustaining a concussion in day 1, unfortunately. And then the last piece is kind of the slightly scariest one, and that is that Jair Alexander, Packers star corner, did leave the field a bit early on day 2 at the near the end of practice. But hopefully it was just cramps, is what Rob Domofsky of ESPN reported that he assumed it was, and what kind of general, because it looked like the trainers took a look at him, it sounds like, but he was moving around all right by as practice was wrapping up. So hopefully nothing too concerning there. And the fact that we made it all the way to the evening without any bad news is always good news. And so we'll see going forward how much he's participating in the next few practices. But don't worry too much if you don't have to yet. And then last two pieces of news. One is that Aaron Jones officially came in at number 64 on the NFL Top 100 as voted by their peers, as voted by other players. So that's kind of cool. And then another unfortunate injury-related news that is semi-Packers adjacent related, but not a Packers player, and that is Joe Burrow of the Bengals, quarterback of the Bengals, seems to have come down with a calf strain during practice today and was carted off the field. The reason this is Packers related is, if you don't remember, the Packers have joint practices with the Bengals in a few weeks. And so he would probably be in jeopardy of missing those practices, which would kind of affect the work that the Packers would be able to get during that time. Obviously, all of that stuff is secondarily important to his health, but, important to note there because it is at least semi-Packers adjacent.
I'm sure the Bengals fans are on their rosaries right now.
Exactly, yeah. It's always scary, This is the dark side of training camp.
Because he went just hopping off the field in the middle of the play.
Yeah, no contact too, and this is the dark side of training camp.
That's the scary part. The no contact. So.
Yeah, and training camp always comes, and the first time players touch the field, it's always like, okay, let's cross our fingers, cross our toes, hold our breath, and make sure just everyone makes it through these practices okay, because anything can happen during these weeks, and a really promising season can kind of turn to ash, just kind of fall apart, and just hope that doesn't happen to any player or any team, and it just sucks when it does. But hopefully it sounds like he might have avoided the worst of it. Fingers crossed on that front. But Dad, should we get into breaking down what we have heard and seen from practices so far?
Absolutely. There's we've had 2 practices now to talk about and see get a little bit of feel for what's going on.
Yeah, and the way we're going to kind of structure today's is we're going to start with some things that each of us had that we found most interesting from these practices, most interesting, most important. Then we're going to hit some things that we weren't really sure what to think about them, and we're going to kind of bounce them off each other and talk about whether or not we thought they were a big deal, a little deal, or no deal. And then just some kind of last-second talking points and brief notes of just some other stuff that maybe doesn't need in-depth discussion, but is just interesting to note at least. But Dad, let's start off with some things that we found most interesting. I figure we can just go every other. Would you like to lead us off?
Sure. I'll start with the offensive line configuration. That Zach Tom looks like, right now, your Packers right tackle. He's had basically all the first-team right tackle reps both days, as opposed to alternating with Nijman. Though it's a little bit hard to compare. It's not necessarily apples to apples with Bakhtiari taking the day off today. So that Nijman did start at left tackle.
Yes.
But today,
even
with Bakhtiari taking the day off.
Yeah, and Bakhtiari didn't get the full complement of 1 snaps on the first day either, it sounds like. Matt LaFleur had stated previously, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, that they're going to be kind of, cautionary with him based on his injury history. But it does seem like, Tom, we talked about during OTAs and minicamp that it looked like he had put on some more weight this season to be able to hold up a little better on the line against top-level pass rushers. And it seems like the Packers seem comfortable having him at right tackle. He's taken all the snaps at right tackle with the 1 so far through 2 days. and he's performed well in practices. It sounds like he had some nice reps against Preston Smith. And
though I think he got beat by Preston once.
Yes, beat inside by Preston once. But then there was another tweet that was like a nice rep at Pass Pro by Tom on Smith. Preston Smith is a good edge rusher. He's going to beat you once in a while. It is what it is.
Yeah. Yes, but so if Tom put on some like good weight and functional strength, he could really become a top tackle.
Yes, especially if he added that weight without losing his top trait, which is his mobility and his agility. But yeah, I think it's exciting to see that from Tom, and I think it opens up some really awesome possibilities. Just having Nijman as that depth swing piece also is nice. The question comes like if one of the guards goes down, does Tom kick inside, and then does Nijman take the tackle spot? There's a whole question mark there.
How many positions do you want to change at once?
Exactly. And although it does sound like Tom has also gotten some work inside as he has been repping at center with the threes, which is an interesting note. As Hansen has been the center with the twos, Meyer's been the center with the ones, but, Tom, they are still getting him some reps inside, presumably to keep him kind of ready in the event that he needs to kick back inside.
Yeah, though I think Tom actually said something about enjoying doing like most of his work at right tackle.
Yes, he did during a brief interview after practice.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with Tom, or should we move on to?
Why don't you move on to one of your interesting points?
Yes. So I think the first one that I had, just to start it off, is that it seems like. I'm going to go with the first one, actually, is that it seems that Love is more willing to scramble through 2 practices than Rodgers was last year. Through 2 days of practices, there were at least 3 instances of him scrambling. One went for, I believe, a touchdown. One went for what would have been a first down. And I think this is really important because scrambling is incredibly valuable in the modern NFL, and even more valuable than the general public might think. According to an article from last year by Ben Solak of The Ringer, from an EPA per play standpoint, a scramble last year on average, and this data was through week 7, so including week 7, a scramble last year on average was over twice as valuable as a pass attempt. 0.508 expected points added per play versus on a scramble versus 0.212 expected points added per play on a pass attempt, which is really bonkers to think about. Because essentially a scramble from an EPA per play standpoint was actually better than any quarterback's pass attempt except for Patrick Mahomes. And that's just a scramble by any quarterback. Like the average scramble by any quarterback was better than a pass attempt by any quarterback not named Patrick Mahomes last year through 7 weeks. And that is really something to think about, especially when we're looking at this kind of modern wave of more mobile quarterbacks and maybe why teams are leaning into these more mobile quarterbacks. And it's a real contrast to what Rodgers was doing last year, where he had kind of seemed to, he's getting older. It's understandable that he had kind of lost this ability and lost this mobility. But according to PFF, he only had 13 scrambles all of last season, so less than 1 a game. Wow. It's going to be valuable to have that back this year because you see all these other teams and you see the stats all say how important it is to be able to scramble and create with your legs as a quarterback. And I think that was a big, interesting piece from the first 2 days of practice is that Love seems willing to scramble and able to scramble.
So I just had a thought as you were kind of presenting that the data, and I read through that article quickly, and they mention or speculate, I should say, that maybe it's because a lot of these scrambles are on 3rd down, and so when they get a first down, they're extremely valuable, adding to the EPA per play. I would like to know what the pass play number would be if you only did it for the 3rd downs, or you controlled for the same breakdown of, 80% of them are 3rd down, 10% first, and 10% second.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that.
Because you're looking at a lot of like 1st and 2nd down where maybe those plays are just not as valuable per play.
Well, it's
which is kind of what they speculate.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, though, because he actually talks about this a bit briefly. Like, it's kind of a small paragraph in the article that he acknowledges, like, hey, scrambles happen more often on third downs, and third down conversions are more valuable in an EPA per play standpoint. But he actually took a look at only first and second downs
for the scrambles
and pass attempts,
okay.
and found that, if I could just open this up, the average scramble on first and second down averaged 0.298 expected points added per play, versus a pass attempt was only 0.193. So less than double, still far more valuable a scramble
so he
was
did
on first and
control
second down
for downs.
Yes, than
at one point.
than a pass attempt.
The difference wasn't as extreme, but the difference was still there.
Was still tangible. Still almost. I mean, like, was it 0.3 versus
30% more?
0.2?
40%?
Yeah, 50% more.
50% more. 50% more.
Which is still pretty remarkable when you think about it,
less.
and really shows how important it is to have some mobility at the quarterback position, which should be returning to Green Bay this year. Anything else on that, or did you want to talk about your next most interesting point?
So I'll go on to my next one, and something that I heard talked about, I think it was today, is that Goodson is getting some looks in kind of that Tyler Ervin gadget role, as well as alignment in the slot. So he had at least 3 times he lined up in the slot, according to Andy Herman, I think today, day 2 of practice, and had one at least jet sweep, though they didn't give him the ball. It was sort of the eye candy jet sweep.
And this is Tyler Goodson, second-year running back out of Iowa. He had a really nice preseason last year, but he couldn't. He ended up on the practice squad, and Patrick Taylor beat him out for that third running back spot. Well, actually, and Patrick Taylor was on the practice squad as well.
They only carried 2 in the 53.
Yeah.
But Patrick Taylor got more of the call-ups and eventually was on the 53, I think, by the end of the season.
Yeah.
But Goodson has some interesting traits. Really good pass catcher. He's actually the fastest running back on the roster with a 4.4240. The next fastest is Jones at 4.49. And everybody else is over 4.5 on the roster, or the last 8 running backs they've had. So it'd be interesting to see what if they could take advantage of that, and this sort of gadget role, manufactured touches is one way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just think, the more player, like, Goodson is, I think, already probably one of their better players with the ball in his hand. Obviously, it's hard to say that when you haven't really seen him take snaps at like an actual NFL level, but just based on, his skill set, what we've seen from him in preseason, I know that that's not like a perfect metric, but it's good to get playmakers the ball, and it's good to find ways to use these players who are good with the ball in their hand in the offense. And, I always thought that Tyler Ervin's role was kind of underrated in the offense, and they had kind of struggled to replace that in some ways.
I think there was somebody once did an analysis of the plays where there was a motion, like jet motion of some kind. The success rate was higher when there wasn't.
I'm so excited to see more motion. I'm so excited to see more motion in the offense.
But I'm curious to see whether Goodson's going to end up as RB3 this year,
or if they even have
the league,
or if they even have 3 running backs.
The guy who gets called up from the practice squad the most.
Fair enough.
We're calling RB3 because I actually suspect they're going to do that again this year.
Yeah.
People say, I've heard somebody say they're going to have 4. It's like, I give that, snowflake chance.
Like a
snowflake,
1%.
Snowflake chance in San Diego this week.
Yeah. And it's like, they didn't keep 3 last year. The odds of them keeping 4 are very low.
Chance in the world.
Unless you want to count DeGuara as like a running back. I don't know.
Now you're just cheating.
I mean, he's a fullback at this point, and that's kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about. And that was that, unless you had anything more on that you wanted to discuss.
No, that was the main thing.
Okay. The next thing I had that I thought was kind of interesting is that Musgrave is kind of ahead of DeGuara as like from a pure tight end standpoint already, which I thought was kind of interesting. That so on day 1, the first personnel they used in the team reps was 21 personnel with Dubs and Watson at wide receiver, Musgrave at tight end, and then Jones and DeGuara in the backfield. And then,
or as you were saying, is that like It's not even 11.5 personnel. What would you call that?
Yeah, it depends if you think of Musgrave as more of a receiver, But then,
or DeGuara is more of a back.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, then it would be 12, and it would be 12.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
yeah.
it's like 1.5, 1.5. It's like 1.5 in each digit. What do you call that?
I don't exactly. And then day 2, the first personnel they used was 11 personnel with Dubs, Watson, Reed at receiver, Musgrave at tight end, and then Jones in the backfield. So it kind of seems like they've almost transitioned away a little bit from DeGuara as like an actual tight end and have kind of leaned into him more purely as a fullback, which they did a little bit last year as well, like as the season went on. But it seems like they're starting that from the very beginning here. They have actually been rotating all 4 tight ends in with the ones, it sounds like, based on some tweets. But yeah,
some people are saying Davis even looked good, but DeGuara got like Love's first target of the training camp.
Yes.
In practice 1.
And actually, I want to take a quick timeout here because I realized that we forgot to do something. I just want to say, before we go any further, and I'm sorry that we forgot to do this, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of the reporters that are at practice. Andy Herman, Ryan Wood, Paul Brettel, Spofford, Mike Spofford, Wes Hodkowitz, et cetera, down
Rob
the
Domofsky,
line. Rob Domofsky,
Matt
Schneidman of The Athletic, et cetera. Anyone else that I forgot for putting in the hours and tweeting out all the stuff that happens at practice. We wouldn't be able to have any idea what was going on without these people, like, essentially going out there, standing in the hot sun in a 90-degree day, and on their phones just tweeting play-by-play of what's going on. So we just wanted to say, I'm sorry it took us this long. We were so excited to talk about, practice that I forgot that the most important thing is saying thank you to these people. Thank
goodness I'm not typing those tweets with my thumbs. Like, who knows what it would say at the end with all the typos I make.
Oh, it'd be a complete mess. And then thank you to Reddit user u/2pointperversion, who does an excellent combination of like essentially aggregates all these tweets into one place that makes it really easy to see all of them, and also all of the interviews together in one place that makes it really easy to see all of them. And yes, so just thank you to all those people that make following Packers practice possible. Yes, but anyway, now that we have that out of the way, I'm glad that I remembered to do that. I'm a little sad that I didn't remember to do it at the beginning.
Yeah,
but what were we?
Mentioned, like, and The Athletic has had some good write-ups. Journal Sentinel Online has had a good summary of the practices.
Yep. There's so many
great resources out there.
And there's so many excellent Packers writers. I know there are a bunch that I forgot to mention. I just wanted to mention as many as I could. But what were we talking about? We were talking about yes,
DeGuara.
it seems they are going with DeGuara in the fullback position, but that was kind of, I was tapering off on that point. Dad, do you want to go to your next one?
Oh, so let's see. So the next thing I had was it's kind of interesting to see that they did the 3 inside linebacker lineup again, at least in day 1, where it was McDuffie joining Campbell and Walker.
We assume. There was. I actually think the tweet that I saw just said McDuffie was
just said
in
McDuffie.
There.
This is true.
We can assume that it's Campbell and Walker.
I'm guessing there was that they didn't make any other changes besides that McDuffie was 3 linebackers all by himself.
Exactly. Well, the interesting thing is like they're having McDuffie in there, and we talked about this before we started recording. Is last year they started to do this a little bit against the Vikings. And they had Chris Barnes in that third linebacker, and unfortunately Chris Barnes got hurt in that game, and then we never really saw it again. And it was the question is like, would that have been more of a staple look from the Packers, a team that really struggled to stop the run last year? If that was maybe their answer to that, and then losing Barnes kind of threw that out the window. It sounds like McDuffie has put on some weight this year. He has always been a bit of a smaller linebacker. He's one of the players that Andy Herman has shouted out as having been one of the best practicers through the first 2 days. It's interesting to think about. And the other thing that I found interesting was that was on a third down. It was 3rd and 3, which, I guess is kind of right between being a passing down and a running down. So, you could argue it's like, oh, they're bringing out the run defense. But I thought that it was interesting on a third down. Did you have sorry, I kind of hijacked that conversation. But
no, that's okay. Because you actually added that last little note about it being on 3rd and 3. So that was your note.
Well, technically it was whoever tweeted that.
Whoever
note,
tweeted
and
that.
I took it from them. Technically.
including the no less with the exclamation mark?
No, that was some editorializing on my part. 3rd down and 3, no less. Yes, but I thought it was interesting because generally 3rd down, passing down.
Yeah, it's interesting to see if they'll try it. Yeah, let's try to see if they'll do something more to shore up the run D up the middle.
Yeah, and they speaking.
Do you
of that,
know? So I'm assuming that was a lineup when they only had 2 defensive linemen. Then
it didn't say, but I was going to add
I'm curious.
they seem to be playing around with personnel a little bit because they also had a lineup with 4 down linemen and 2 edge rushers, so 6 across the line.
Who was the extra lineman in that? Do you know?
Don't know. Not sure.
I saw that, but I don't know who was the added lineman. There's several options, but I don't know who it was.
Yeah, but that's just they seem to be playing around with personnel a little more during this offseason, which, always a good thing to vary up the looks you're giving to the offense. Anything else you wanted to add there, or should I move on to my next one?
Why don't you go on to your last interesting
my
item.
Last interesting item is that Jaden Reed was getting some of those end-around touches. And it was interesting to me.
Did he take advantage of it?
He looked good doing it because this is one of the plays that there is, I guess, smuggled out video of that is out there. You can go find it. We retweeted it. I'm not sure if it's still on Twitter, but we did retweet it. But the interesting thing
now
there...
we're part of that black market.
I know, right? Just passing it along. But the interesting thing there is a discussion I found interesting that I think so Justice Mosqueda of Acme Pack and Company was a guest on Andy Herman's Pack-A-Day YouTube show. And something that he said he was a bit concerned about was, he was pretty much asking Andy Herman, like, how do you see Christian Watson being used in this offense? And Herman was saying, like, I think he'll be used a lot of, like, design touches, some end-arounds, et cetera, et cetera. And Mosqueda's concern was, like, okay, if he's going to be, like, a bit of that end-around guy, he's probably going to have to line up off the line to get, like, to get those touches, which leaves Dobbs at the X-receiver spot where he'd have to deal with a lot of press, and that was a coverage that he really struggled against at times last year. And so this is kind of interesting to me because... if Reed kind of moves into more of that design touch, like end-around role, and he's good at it, then maybe that allows Watson to kind of be at that X spot, and then Dobbs can be more of the flanker, and then it kind of works out where players are maybe in positions that are more suited to their skill sets. And obviously it's possible that Dobbs has improved where he is better at press this year, and it's not as much of a concern. But I know it's a concern that's been expressed by people whose opinions I really value in the Packers media world. And so I thought that was interesting that if they're getting Reed, those end-around touches maybe waylays some of those concerns. And he was one of Andy Herman's players of the day as well. And Dylan was giving him some...
Well, I guess somebody was making the Cobb comparisons and mentioned it to Dylan.
Dylan was actually saying... He was saying, I think it would be a little premature, but, you definitely see some of that. Yeah, he was getting some Randall Cobb comparisons, some young Cobb comparisons. You don't hate it. You don't hate to see it. I think that would be an amazing outcome. That would be great. Big fan of that.
Touchdown punt return?
Mm-hmm. And it sounds
because I
like...
think Nixon's still going to be doing the kick returns.
Yeah, and it sounds like he's going to be doing punt returns.
Nixon said he was giving him some pointers already.
Yeah, and Nixon said they've been battling already. Iron sharpened their iron sharpens iron
from
with,
slot
Nixon
and
the
the nickel.
Exactly. But that was my last thing that I found especially interesting. Dad, did you have one more as well?
No, I think for the interesting things, the other ones I've moved on to, we can go on to our other things we noticed or notes, odds and ends.
So let's move on to our next part then, and that is that our kind of things we weren't sure how to feel about. And so the way we're kind of structuring this one is I'm going to hit you with a thing that I wasn't sure about. You're going to hit me, where we'll alternate again. And then the options are, is this a big deal? Is this a little deal? Or is this no deal at all? Those are your 3 options. The first one I have my question for is that the defense won both days. On day 1, the offense had to do push-ups for losing, and on day 2, they had to do up-downs. Dad, is it a big deal, a little deal, or no deal that the defense won the first 2 days of practice?
I'll call that a little deal.
Okay.
I think generally the defense is ahead of the offense early in training camp. But I guess I won't call it nothing.
Okay. Yeah, and honestly, it's like the defense was ahead even when Rodgers was the quarterback. So it's like,
well, I don't know. So, and then I have I'll put this actually as my first thing I mentioned. One of mine is the run defense looks overall better this year than last year. So, what do you think of that? Big deal, little deal, or no deal?
I'm going to say little deal because, it's giving shades. It's giving shades of this D-line is dominant, and
you know exactly where I was going next. because it's exactly like last year. This D-line is the most dominant D-line ever. It's like, oh yeah, well, we're going against our offensive line,
like twos and threes. But yeah, the reason I'm not saying no deal is because they are actually going against the starters. They are going against Elton and Tom and Runyon. Like, they are going against the established starters at the positions. It is not Hansen
at guard and Newman at tackle in game one.
It is not completely like, because like you said, it's like last year was like, oh, we think this is D-line. I think the wording has the chance to be something special. And no, they did not. They were not that good. They were getting propped up by the fact they were going against mediocre offensive linemen. But the fact that there is a little bit more experience now with Wyatt going into his second year, Slayton going into his third year, I think.
Third year.
And obviously Kenny's still there. Obviously there's some questions at depth behind that, but I'm going to say little deal because, I think it's somewhere between, they're looking good and, we heard this last year. So that's where I'm at right now.
Fool me once. Shame on you. Fool me twice. Shame on me.
I was watching
fool me for Hope Springs Eternal. I don't know what the answer is to that.
Well, the one I saw the other day was fool me once, fool me twice, fool me chicken soup with rice. And that was Todd from BoJack Horseman, which was so perfect. But anyway, the next one I had was, so far, there have been no first-team reps for Lucas Van Ness yet, who was the Packers' first-round pick this year. Hollins got first-team reps on day one across from Preston Smith, and Enigbare got the first-team reps on day two across from Preston Smith. Dad, is this a big deal, a little deal, or no deal? I can tell you
it a little deal. It concerns me a little bit.
It does concern you a little bit, right?
I'd like to see him being so much better than those guys because he's the number 12 pick. He should be a stud, right? He should be he should be just jumping to the top of the line.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like
anyway. That's what I want to see. I'd like to see the new players be such an improvement over the other players that the team is going to be better because of it.
Because at this point, that puts him fifth, right? At the edge rusher depth chart.
So far, he's fifth.
That's fifth. And the thing is, it's like
without Gary.
Well, no, fifth with Gary.
Oh, fifth with Gary.
Yes. Fourth without Gary. Preston, Hollins, Enigbare, and then him, presumably. But fourth,
Brendan Cox,
maybe. But fourth without Gary, fifth with Gary, which is I think it's more of a deal than those other two little deals. If this continues for the rest of camp, I think it's a big deal because you're a top 15 pick. You're a borderline top 10 pick. Like, you should probably be ahead of Hollins, who was cut by the Rams last year. Yeah, he looked good for the Packers last year, but he was waived by the Rams. And Enigbare, who was a fifth-round pick 2 years ago. Like, you should be ahead of them. And I understand It's like, you're the rookie, you have to earn your spot. But if he doesn't earn that spot by the end of camp, I'm going to say big deal. But for now, little deal, but more of a deal than those other two little deals.
I think it's, by the end of camp, if he's not at least number 3,
it's a big deal.
It's a big deal because he should be rising up. So we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Maybe they're just making him earn it. Are they pulling it like an Iowa? He's not a starter. He's an underclassman.
Well, I worry it's going to be same thing with Wyatt, where he's going to be stuck behind two guys for unknown reasons, and that we've seen it happen before. Is all I'm going to say. So
yes.
it's almost a big deal to me. It's getting like if it continues for a few
It's
weeks.
not
like
a big
I said,
deal. It's too early to be a big deal.
That's the
It
that's the only
could
thing.
become a big deal, but I don't think it's a big deal yet. But it is, because you'd like to see him already at like what Musgrave is doing.
Yeah,
So he jump to the top of the line.
or even what Reed is doing, where he's already past Toure.
Seems to.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. We'll see, I guess. What's your next one?
My next one are drops by Watson. He's had a couple already. He looked like at least 2 on day 1, and then he also had 2 balls knocked out of his hands on day 2, one by Jair, which is, that's not bad at all, but also one by Valentine. Valentine, I think it was, not Valentine.
Yeah, Corey. Not.
Though he did have 2 touchdowns today on day 2 that looked apparently pretty nice. There's a video of one of them, but not of the other.
I'm gonna say. I feel a little boring saying little deal for all of these. It's a little bit of a deal. He struggled a bit at the start of the year last year with drops. I'm leaning towards it's between little and no because he did have some pretty substantial drops last year and he was able to overcome them. And he was able to put together some really excellent performances as the year went on. He didn't let those drops define how the year was going to go for him, which is a big deal, especially for a rookie, and the fact that going into his second year, he's going to have even more confidence. He's going to have a quarterback that's not as demanding of him and not as intimidating.
I think that happened more to Dobbs by the end of the year than it did to Watson.
Yeah, but, it's I think it's a little column, but it also happened to Watson, I think,
At the beginning of the year. But I would say I was looking through Watson's...
Well, the thing is, this was
game
something,
by game,
but this was something about him. Drops were a concern coming out of college, so that's why it's not noted.
And it started off right, but I'm just looking at last year. His drops, he had a fair number at the beginning of the year, but his last 6 games, 0 drops.
Yeah, and that's why I say little to no deal because we've seen him overcome drops before. I'm not saying no deal because we've seen him have problems with drops before, and. You could easily see those happening in a game. I don't think it's a big deal because I don't think it's going to completely derail everything that he's done so far or the player that he can be. But it's a thing. It's not a thing. Like we've seen him drop balls in the NFL. We saw him drop balls in college. But yeah, so I'd say little deal. My next one for you is. Oh, actually, I don't have any more for you. Do you want to hit me with the last one or two that you have?
I've got a couple.
Okay, I'll steal one of yours. How about that? How about I steal one of yours? Blocking struggles by Musgrave. He got blown by both Devontae Wyatt and Preston Smith on day 1. Big deal, little deal, no deal.
I'd say in some ways it's a big deal. The only reason you'd temper that a little bit is because we expected it.
Yeah.
In pass pro in particular. But it's still an overall big deal for his ability to be on the field as much as we'd like to see him. If he can't, improve his pass pro game, we will see less of Musgrave and more of Tyler Davis.
Yeah, and maybe Kraft, but that's a bit of a mystery box as well. But yeah, I agree. I would have said little deal because okay, we know that's his weakness.
It's something we already knew.
Yeah, and so it's not surprising. But
it's not a surprise, but I think it's still a deal.
You did kind of sway me a little bit because hey, if he keeps blowing blocks, they're not gonna want to put him out there on and he's not gonna be an every down player if he's blowing blocks a lot. And
right.
maybe it doesn't matter because he just turns into a pseudo big slot bit just a wide receiver, and so it doesn't end up mattering.
He's never in line.
Yeah, never ever, just a big receiver. And I don't think that would be the worst thing for a first year tight end to do.
No.
But
if he's doing that, he'll actually probably end up with more receiving targets and yards.
Yes, probably sir, but less snaps and less impact, like in that way. And we know that LaFleur likes his tight ends to be able to do a lot of everything, so you can have that illusion of complexity on offense.
It's one of those things where you don't want your personnel to give away your play call.
Because if you can't block and you put him out there, kind of know what we're doing, buddy. You're not running it to his side, at least.
Right.
But, so I see what you're saying there. Do you want to hit me with the next one?
So, I guess someone who loves accuracy. He was off target in day one. It was supposedly winning, but especially on deep balls. He was a quick math in the tweets put it like, I forget, it's like 6 to 10, 6 to 12. Not exactly sure how many attempts.
Yeah,
he
that's
had.
just based on the tweets we were able to see. That's not like an
And
official
then
count. And then day 2 we got an
5
official
of
count.
13 in team drills today. Day 2, according to Matt Schneidman, The Athletic. So in day 1, he like overthrew Musgrave after he broke like wide open past Ballantyne, I think it was.
Yep.
Underthrew Dobbs when he was going up against, maybe it was Jair. Missed Watson wide, and then pulled Toure wide out of bounds. And then today, he missed high to Musgrave, and he missed Dobbs. Though one of these might have been an intentional throwaway, or pseudo throwaway.
And I would say no deal. I don't think I'm not that concerned, because day 1 was not great. Day 1 was like actually not great based on.
It was almost indoors. It was storm ended just before they started.
Well, but LaFleur said that he didn't consider that level of wind to be that impactful.
It wasn't like a couple years ago against the Vikings where there was no passing game.
Yeah, it's just like
it was just
running the rock. Yep. And they lost that game. The Packers did. But so I think no deal, because, and maybe I'm a homer, but there have also been a lot of drops. And so those numbers are definitely affected by the drops.
Well, I just listed the individual plays that were not necessarily drop related. Though some of those were like, it was a little off target. Yeah. Maybe because it's still been caught.
Yeah. And then, the Musgrave one, I heard specifically Andy Herman talk about and say, hey, I think he was under pressure on that play, and he was kind of putting it somewhere where incomplete or Musgrave was going to get it. And so it's like, okay, like that's a good decision. I'm fine with that decision. People who have been there have been like, the decision making is fine, and I think that's like the most important.
Yes, so
the decision making has been good so far, and that's like number 1A. The accuracy, it's hard to tell when you don't know if the accuracy is on the quarterback 100% or if the receiver's not at the right depth or running something that the quarterback doesn't expect him to run. Like
that happened at least once, I think, between Etling and Malik Heath.
But my point is, like, some of this accuracy stuff might not even be on Love. And we've seen him progress through his reads well, according to people who have been at practice, make good decisions, not try and do too much. And I think that's, that's good.
And this is like big progress over his last year of college.
Yes. And
he was very loosey-goosey with the ball.
Exactly. And making just all kinds of crazy decisions and throwing tons of picks, which would be a problem. Like, that would get the Packers killed this year, as if he throws a ton of picks. The other thing I was going to say with regards to that was, there's some concern. He was 1 of 5 in the low red zone, so within the 5-yard line, specifically, according to Schneidman.
That was today?
Yeah.
So was that one completion the one to Musgrave? Where Musgrave was stopped by Jair at the end? Not quite making it into the end zone?
No, I think that one was from the 17-yard line, if I remember correctly. Because that was the end of practice. But, within the 5-yard line, it's not exactly, like, easy to complete passes down there when everything is slammed together and there's no space.
Shades of last year's conversion rate.
Yeah. And
from the low red zone.
But, like, I don't expect, in practice, with plays you have not run, with players you have not run before, when the defense has an advantage, when there's no space, I don't expect an amazing completion rate. So, I think it is what it is. Obviously, you hope he gets better, but I'm going to say no deal for now.
Okay, no deal at all.
The next one I have for you is the last one we have, and that is that Bakhtiari will have scheduled rests, but his participation in practice will be fluid.
As opposed to the fluid on his knee.
Yes. I had to double-check the reading of that one. And we kind of talked about this briefly in our last episode when we did
that's Matt LaFleur's wording of using the word fluid there.
And we had talked about this in our last episode a bit when we had talked about, like, essentially hyping up training camp, and there was, like, What would David Bakhtiari have to do? Like, how many practices would Bakhtiari have to participate in for you to feel like comfortable and like not worried at all? And we kind of settled on like, okay, practices in like 3 of 5 or 2 of 5 a week, but it's fully scheduled and we know when he's practicing and when he's not.
And he's not missing any of the scheduled ones.
Yes. How do you feel knowing that this is the plan? No deal, little deal, big deal. Are you concerned, etc.?
Little deal, because I don't like that last phrase.
The fluid.
It means they may not have a schedule that they think they can stick to with that phrase.
Yeah, but counter argument. It's just kind of protecting the player, not making him have to feel like he has to practice just because he's scheduled to practice. Like, if he doesn't feel right, he probably shouldn't be.
No, he shouldn't. But that's also concerning.
That's a fair point. That is also concerning. Yes, that's true.
So if they feel like they have to do that they don't, I guess what it comes down to by saying it's fluid, and so we might have to be changing things on the fly, it means they're not yet confident in what that schedule is.
Yeah,
maybe they will be after. Maybe they need to go through preseason to figure out what that schedule is. By the end of preseason, they'll know what the schedule is.
Yeah, and they're not confident that one day his knee will feel good and the next day it'll feel good. Like, they're not confident that he'll wake up, that he won't wake up and be like, I can't go today, which is what happened last year. Like, for games, he woke up and he was like, I can't play.
But one thing, I think that was a stretch where they started ramping up how many days a week he was practicing,
which was a mistake.
And it turned out looks like a mistake in hindsight.
Yeah,
that they should not have been pushing him so hard to practice. They may have practiced 4 days that week, and it's like, oh, that was it. I had 4 days in me for the week, and we used them all up before Sunday.
Brilliant. But yeah, so no, I agree with you there. That makes sense. So that kind of ends our things we were unsure about. And last, we just kind of have some odds and ends. Nothing for big discussion or anything that we found super interesting, but interesting enough to at least mention here. And let's kind of go every other again. Mine was that this note is just about Anders Carlson, who kind of projects to be the Packers kicker this year. Was 5 of 6 on day 1. We didn't hear how he did on day 2.
I didn't hear anybody even mention it.
Nope. But he hit from 40 yards, 41 yards, 42 yards, 43 yards, and 45 yards, and missed from 44 yards, although according to Matt Schneidman of The Athletic, that miss, the laces were not properly turned. They were 90-degree angle to the left. Laces out,
Laces
Dan.
out, Dan.
Laces out, Dan.
But I also heard somebody else on a podcast, and I can't remember. Maybe it was one of the Pack-A-Day podcasters. I can't remember now who said this. That it was extremely close to being... It was a barely miss.
Okay.
To the point where the people calling it were like, okay, I guess I'll call that one out.
And also, that was the day it was windy also. And the wind is going to affect the kicking game a lot more than it is the passing game. But yeah, so pretty good from Carlson so far, I would say, Dad. That's pretty exciting. What's your first odd?
So my first thing kind of odds and ends is Jonathan Garvin seems to be shifting from edge to D-line.
Yeah, and it makes sense. D-line or edge is a little like
it's
stopped
gotten
up.
Crowded. Where they've got maybe 6 edge players ahead of him if he had stayed there.
Yeah, if you include Cox. Yeah,
right. And so I'm curious with this move to D-line whether they've instructed him in the offseason. Okay, this is what we're going to do to you. Gain 25 pounds.
Maybe
because he's a little he's. Lucky for him, he's one of the bigger edges. He's like, it was 263, 265, something like that, as opposed to a 235, 240 pound edge where it'd be really hard for him to move inside. But, if you really want to hold up in the middle, it'd probably be better if he was at least in the 280s.
Yeah. And
285, 290.
It's also not a great sign for him because it's another tweener D tackle. And I'm imagining they would rather keep Wooden and Brooks instead of him. So
I think what it is he going to be ahead of Ford?
Probably not, because they don't have that many. They need more bigger body types. Like
Ford,
Slayton and Kenny are the only ones over 300 pounds. Like,
is Wyatt not like 305?
Oh no, yeah. Okay, Wyatt is like a touch over 300. You're right. But they don't. They have a couple tweener guys, and they like kicking in. They have talked about kicking in Lucas Van Ness and kicking in Gary. So it's like. I don't know where the spot is for him, and I think this is
when you first hear it's like, oh, is this Burks being tried out at
It's somewhere
edge
it's somewhere,
again.
It's somewhere from Burks being an edge to Looney being a tight end. It's somewhere on that spectrum. My next kind of odd and end is LaFleur said that Sean Ryan looks like he's in better shape this year. It is that time of the year. Everyone's in the best shape of their life.
Yes.
And also Ryan said that he's not sure what he took that got him suspended for PEDs last year, but he has cut out all supplements from his diet. What else is he going to say? But yeah, so that's my next odd and end. What's your next one?
So, well, hopefully, like, he was, took it too casually last year. And, wasn't in the shape he should have been to start his pro career. And now he's matured. I'm hoping. We'll see.
You never know. Yeah.
You never know. Maybe he'll turn it around. It'd be nice if he did.
He has been with the second. He's been a left guard with the second team so far. So he's not totally
could use
buried.
a little more depth on the interior.
Yes, 100%.
It'd be nice if he could turn into what they hoped he was when they drafted him. What I would put for my next sort of little odds and ends is Dontavian Wicks with the nice blocking rep on a run play in day one. He got a shout out from Andy Herman.
I believe so. I believe it was Herman.
Maybe more than one, but yeah, it was about him saying
nice Ford, right? Was what it was?
Yes.
Yeah, on a run
and
play.
Got a good run for Patrick Taylor. I don't remember who it was for.
I was going to say Taylor also. So
that's a route for him to get on the field more often.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he didn't get the concussion on that play. He got it later on a broken up pass attempt.
Yeah, apparently
tackle whatever.
Yeah, apparently it was a hospital ball a little bit. It was kind of like over the middle late, and never a good thing in practice.
Yeah. At least it wasn't a joint practice.
I know, right?
Like it's like get the Jay Sternberger treatment.
Yeah. Ugh. The next one I had was that Owens and Levitt are the second safeties on both days, the safeties with the twos, which I thought was a little interesting. I mean, Moore didn't practice day one, but he did practice day two. He was not with the twos. And Anthony Johnson Jr. was also not with the twos. So Levitt in with the twos at safety, Dad. He's not really been a safety. I mean, he's more of a special teamer, like a pure special teamer.
I mean, we saw him at
play
safety in the preseason. Or was that?
I can't remember. I just remember it
didn't
not
get
going.
In the Viking game.
All I can
I just
remember
remember him getting
didn't go well. It was not good.
Toasted.
Yeah, he's a good special teamer. He is good at what he is.
His position is special team,
and he's
his
good
position
at it.
is not safety.
He is
his
a
position
good
is special team.
He is a good special teamer, and that's what he's good at. He's not generally a safety, so it is a little bit surprising to me that
it surprised me too. I expect that we'll see as Moore gets healthier, he's going to move up, and hopefully Anthony Johnson will as well.
Yeah, but that was my next odd and end.
What I'm curious, is there any hope for any of these safeties they've added in the last 2 years to have a Rasul or Devondre Campbell style breakout?
Don't ever bet on that. Never ever.
I'm not betting on it. I'm just praying for hope.
Is there any chance? I mean,
that is in odds to bet on. No.
Goodness. I mean, you can make a lot of money if you were right. But no, I think
the odds are so long.
I think they should just be happy, if any of them is passable. If any of these guys that they've added are as good as Rudy Ford was last year, I would consider that a win. Ford wasn't great, but he was fine. He's good enough. They're going to roll with him as the starter this year, it sounds like. So, but what's your next odd and end?
Jair's looking like the best player on the team.
Yep.
Regardless of position, he's looking like the best player on the team.
Yeah, he's kicking everyone's butt. It's been good. It's been nice.
He's taking names.
Yeah, and you love to see it. I watching Jair play is so much fun. I love watching Jair.
That interview last year,
the Dolphins one
during the Dolphins game,
such a good interview.
It's the best interview I saw all year in sports last year.
Oh, is he really overthrowing this? No, it's excellent. It's the noises, it's amazing. My next odd and end is that Innis Gaines seems to be cross training at both safety and corner. He was with the corners on day 2. It sounded like he was playing safety day 1. I thought that was interesting. They like cross train their defensive backs, and the more you can do, the more likely you are to make the team. So maybe he has an outside shot at making the roster. And I have not heard Shamar John Charles' name mentioned one time in any of these practices.
I did.
Okay.
He had a rep that got noticed.
Okay, that's good for him.
I forget who tweeted it because I don't know if it was in the compilation
Well, these are odds and ends. We don't need to.
But he
delve
made
too
it he broke up a pass or made a tackle on a run play. I can't remember what it was.
Nice.
But yeah, I saw one mention of him.
Okay. All right. Well, that's my thing for Innis Gaines. He also got a mention for having a pass breakup as well. What's your next one or last one?
So the last one I have is about the D-line. Again, back to the D-line, back to the trenches. That when they're... So it's just interesting how they're live. So when they're in base, so far they've had Clark at the nose. It sounds like with Wyatt and Slayton at the ends. And I think in the, OTAs, they had Slayton at the nose, which is kind of what I was expecting. They'd have more Slayton at the nose and free up Kenny to, have a little more freedom to try to gap penetrate and rush the passer. And then when they've gone to nickel, it's Wyatt who's come off the field with Slayton and Kenny being the two down linemen. So both of those are kind of interesting.
That's almost a big deal, little deal, no deal, because we talked about it a little bit. It'd be better
had
to be
this
seeing
in a big deal, little deal, no deal at one point.
Because ideally, Wyatt would be like
same thing we were talking about for Van Ness.
Exactly, Wyatt would be ahead of Slayton, but it is what it is. And then my final one is that Aaron Rodgers texted Love before the first day of practice to wish him luck, which is nice show of respect from one player to another. And they were teammates for 3 years and presumably worked a lot together in the quarterback room, and told him to be himself, just do him. And it's cool. It sounds like Rodgers has been doing really well at Jets practice, and wish him the best, and hope he plays 65% of games, and that otherwise the Jets are terrible. 65% of snaps, yes, and that otherwise the Jets.
That's
are terrible.
The number that matters.
Yes, and
that 35 for the 35 whatever dollar number that doesn't.
Who
matter.
cares? Yes, and that just hopefully the Jets are
The
bad.
only thing I care about that is it filled up my stupid Twitter feed, so it took me forever to actually scroll down and find the actual plays for the practices.
All right,
little rant. Where's the cloud? I need to shake my fist at a cloud.
Yeah, well. that's something you're an expert at. But anyway, so that is kind of the last of the stuff we had from Packers practice through 2 days. Exciting times. Football is almost here. The Hall of Fame game is next week, which is really the true signaling of like the season almost being
first
here.
Game.
We are something like 40 days away from the actual first game, that Thursday night Lions-Chiefs. And, we're counting down those days. But anyway, thanks so much for listening. If you like what you heard, like we said before, come follow us on the app formerly known as Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out when we got new episodes, articles we find interesting, everything from practice. Come subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice or YouTube. We put our episodes out all those places, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. We really help our numbers if you came and subscribed. But again, thank you so much for listening. We'll be doing one episode for the rest of the offseason and then 2 episodes a week in season. Sorry, 1 episode a week for the rest of the offseason and then 2 episodes a week for the season. So come get your Packers news here if you like what you heard so far. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.